Good evening, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service with you on the 17th of April. As always, we encourage you to stay up to date with your local weather information no matter what part of Alaska you're watching from tonight. You can always find the latest forecast information on our Alaska Weather Information line. That's at 1-800-472-0391. You can find us online as well at weather.gov/Alaska. One click will take you to your local forecast office, whether that's in Fairbanks, Juneau, or in Anchorage, serving all the parts of Alaska. And if you can't find what you're looking for, whether it's something from the Alaska Aviation Weather Unit, the National Tsunami Warning Center, the Alaska Pacific River Forecast Center, and you're interested in breakup information, send me an email. I'm happy to reply just as quickly as I can. david.snider@noaa.gov is one of the easiest ways that I can serve you directly. Let's take a look at what's going on across the interior of Alaska tonight. Hazardous weather information includes wind tonight for the mainly the north and central parts of the interior. Winds will be blowing generally from the east and could be as strong as 40 miles per hour at times. With that, we'd expect maybe a few things to be blowing around that normally wouldn't be, but nothing too severe there. Don't plan on a whole lot of visibility disruptions. It doesn't look like we've got a lot of wind or smoke or anything like that, or smoke or snow, I should say, blowing around. It'd just be kind of a steady to occasionally gusty situation there. It winds up to about 40 miles per hour. Most likely this is going to happen in the evening hours and overnight, and by this time tomorrow things should have improved. So wind advisories are posted for the central and northern sections of the interior. Now there is one little aside. In northern parts of southeast for the Klondike and White Pass area, we're expecting to see up to 9 inches of snow, and that could start as early as tomorrow night and into Thursday, and it could stretch out over a period of about 24 to 36 hours. So it's not all going to come at once, which is really good news. But once the weather starts to change here, one of the focuses for that change will be a chance of some snow and accumulating snow at that around the White Pass area and the Klondike Highway. So if you have plans to drive out or you have folks driving in, make sure they know the weather is changing and that snow is a possibility for that stretch of the road. Here's a look at the visible satellite picture, and if you've watched the show over the last 7 years or so, it's amazing it's been that long, you know I love the visible satellite picture because that means the sun is coming back. At least in Anchorage, we're gaining about 5 minutes or so of sunlight a day now, so this is good news, and boy, the visible satellite picture is just a much more crisp image that you can see a lot more detail with. So love, love, love that. Here is our low pressure system just south of St. Paul. You can see, if you look carefully, kind of that spiraling structure that loops out and away from the low as that advances in from the southwest to north and east. You see clouds building up ahead of that one more loop, and you can see several other circulations, one of those in the southern Gulf. Generally dry conditions across the interior and almost cloud-free. A lot of what we're seeing here is the Alaska Range and some of the lingering snowpack across the Brooks Range and the interior, but you can certainly see how that has been decreasing just in 1 day's time alone. So some big changes there with the sun. Here is the infrared satellite picture now. This is the temperature sensing where the cloud should be. And you can certainly see the clear sky we've got over the central and eastern interior, all the way up toward Arctic Village, down toward Yakutat and central and northern parts of southeast. A generally dry day today as well. But as this wave moves your way, all those clouds are going to fill in across the region and your weather is going to change. This is what's going to bring the snow to northern parts of southeast and probably a fairly wet period to the central and southern parts of the Panhandle. Out west, fairly unsettled weather across the Bering Sea. With that, we're getting change in the ice conditions into the Bering Strait now. We'll have a look at the ice update here in just a few minutes, but some fairly large polynyas forming around Norton Sound and into Kotzebue Sound, and changes there north of the Bering Strait taking shape. Here's a look at the weather map for today. A 974 millibar low there. We've got some gales across the region, but no major warnings or watches ahead of the system for southwest. It doesn't look all that bad as far as storms go. Periods of rain will continue across southwestern Alaska, and you can see not a whole lot's going on across the north and eastern Gulf right now as far as really active weather concerns. A little bit of light snow up there around Point Hope and into Point Lay. That could just be some ice crystals falling on the sensor there, but maybe not exactly a real decent snow. Wind and snow will probably be blowing through the northern coast as we head through tonight. The pressure gradient tightening up, a lot of wind moving through the region. Low pressure doesn't really change in its intensity at all. It creeps eastward just a little bit, and the front expands into the YK Delta and over Kodiak Island, with rain developing across parts of southeast, south central, mainly in the Gulf Coast there. Still dry for the Anchorage area, but watch for some snow up across the higher terrain. And again, the wind picking up for the central and western chain, with generally clear conditions up north. And really not a big change there tomorrow. A VFR flying expected for the northern areas, especially north of the Yukon. But we are going to see a lot more cloud cover across south central and southwest, and certainly in southeast, as your weather is starting to take a turn for the wetter, colder, and maybe snowier if you're up around the Klondike Highway, as we mentioned. Triple point part of the low reforming here and kind of taking away the thunder and the main show, as it were, across the western Gulf. That deepens to 996 millibars, and you can see we're now in that steady south flow into the Gulf Coast. Out west, showers will linger across the central chain. We'll still see some murky conditions around the Pribilofs and most of the Alaska Peninsula and parts of southwest, while dry conditions and VFR continues up north. By Thursday, though, clouds are filling in. You'll see some areas of blowing snow still be an issue. It looks like the winds may still be blowing through the Yukon Valley as well. So we'll see if those wind advisories stick around again tonight and into early tomorrow. We're expecting winds up to about 40 miles per hour. The front reforms, and we have low pressure now over the Kenai Peninsula by Thursday. That pushes the front into southeast, and again could really crank up the snow for the Klondike Highway region and probably bring rain, steady conditions at least to many locations in the Panhandle. Wouldn't be surprised to see that mixing a little bit of snow in at times. Out across the west, some pockets of rainfall for the chain. To the west, southwest, you're mainly looking at cloud cover, some occasional rounds of rain and snow with that, but generally east and northeasterly wind will be a little bit drier, except in the vicinity of this low pressure here across south central Alaska, and could be some snow across the Copper River Basin. But generally speaking, this will be a colder situation for many in south central and southwest. Let's take a look at the temperatures tonight. In fact, as we head into southeast, 30s and 40s tonight, low to mid 30s for south central, Kodiak 40 degrees, just about 20 degrees or so around Fairbanks. Northway and Eagle will be a little bit colder, back in the single digits to about 10. 1 below in Barrow and Utqiagvik, 22 around Kivalina. 26 degrees for Nome, and southwestern Alaska back in the lower to mid 30s. Most areas into Bristol Bay above freezing, and you'll stay in the mid to upper 30s tomorrow. For south central, another mild day ahead of the weather maker there, upper 40s to about 50 degrees. Upper 40s for southeast. The north slope, especially north of the Brooks Range, still looking at single digits and low teens. Ambler and out toward Fort Yukon, 30s to low 40s. Overnight lows Thursday morning, 5 to 10 below in the north slope. South central, mid to upper 30s. Southwest, at or above freezing near 40 in Dutch Harbor and Unalaska. About the same for southeast. High temperatures on Thursday, still mild. 40s and 50s for south central. Teens and single digits for the north slope. Bristol Bay, you're looking at mid 40s there. Bethel, about 46.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
On to flying weather now. IFR conditions will linger out across the Bering Sea, out across the eastern side of the Kenai Peninsula and around the Kenai Fjords area. Expect some patchy IFR to start, and also on the eastern side of Kodiak Island and along the misty fjords of southeast. While up north, the northern sections of the Panhandle should begin at VFR, but this is going to be one of the last mornings for that, I presume. Across the north, IFR conditions just off the Chukchi coast with MVFR fairly widespread across the north slope. You'll see that improves very quickly as we head into the afternoon on your Wednesday. IFR, of course, lingers across most of the Bering Sea with MVFR conditions fairly widespread across the Gulf, Kodiak Island, and southeast. And as promised, IFR conditions drop into Chilkoot and White Pass regions as well as areas around Juneau for your afternoon on Wednesday, while most of the mainland is really hovering around VFR conditions through Wednesday afternoon. IFR will spread out across the northern Gulf as we head into Thursday morning and take over all of southeast. You can see it widespread north to south and across most of the northern Gulf and Prince William Sound. MVFR conditions expected across the Kenai Peninsula and stretching up into the Anchorage area, northward into Tanita Pass and most of the western Alaska Range passes. Southwest will be hit and miss with IFR and MVFR, but you can see just offshore of Togiak and all the way up toward Bethel, there will be some open areas of VFR conditions. IFR lingering around the Pribilofs for your Thursday morning with MVFR fairly widespread across the Alaska Peninsula and the chain. IFR conditions will be hit and miss across the Bering Sea, but it looks like over the Pribilofs for your Thursday afternoon. Look for IFR conditions around the northern Gulf Coast with some improvement out over the open water, and some of your north and western Alaska Range passes will see some improvement as well. Most of the interior should be VFR and MVFR to occasional IFR for the north and eastern coast along the Beaufort Sea. Here's your pass conditions in detail now. For Anaktuvuk and Adigan Pass, we expect to see VFR conditions through most of your Wednesday. Northern areas look pretty good, as well as most of the interior, until you get down toward the Alaska Range. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass, we expect to see MVFR conditions there. Rainy Pass also looking at marginal conditions through most of your Wednesday. For Windy Pass, look for VFR conditions there all the way eastward toward Isabel and Mentasta Pass, but you'll probably change over toward MVFR as the day goes on. Tonita Pass right now looking like VFR for Wednesday. That may change as we get into Thursday. Portage Pass also seeing quick improvements to VFR as the day goes on after a start at IFR. And it's all heading east and south toward Chilkoot and White Pass. Watch for IFR conditions to develop there by Wednesday afternoon, and you'll be back in it again on Thursday. Freezing levels show that there's not a whole lot of warm air gathered up in one spot, but we are seeing some of that warmth spread northward into the eastern Gulf. Levels there reaching above 2,000 feet for Sitka, southward toward Ketchikan, Craig, and Klawock. For Norton Sound around the Seward Peninsula all the way out toward Wales and Tin City. Levels there just a little bit above 2,000 feet, and also a small bubble of warm air up across the Chukchi Coast. Otherwise, the surface freezing line hovering over the YK Delta south of St. Lawrence Island to about Juneau, and then southward through the Misty Fjords region right now for your Wednesday morning. Icing potential is fairly widespread, and really the concentrated area, if there was one area of larger risk, it would probably be this region around the low pressure system out here in the Bering Sea. Levels there above 4 to about 5,000 feet to reach into the isolated moderate region. And then we still have some lingering moisture here across the Copper River Basin and into parts of southeast, anywhere from 4 to about 6,000 feet. Right now, the risk does not seem to reach into considerable moderate. The jet stream shows that area of low pressure fairly well. That very tight circulation is stacked all the way down to the surface, and you can see it here in the next few charts. The trough working through the western Gulf, speeds there reaching into southeastern Alaska at 105 knots, and then responding into another area of low pressure across the western U.S. And we have cold high pressure up across the Arctic, sending us that northerly flow, helping to push some of the colder air further and further south. Here's that low at 9,000 feet. You can see a steady southerly flow across most of the mainland, anywhere from 25 to about 35 knots. Easterlies across the North Slope and the Brooks Range around 15 to 30 knots, and southerlies reaching into southeastern Alaska as strong as 40 knots there as they reach over some of the higher terrain. North and westerlies across the western Bering Sea there. Low pressure pretty much in the same spot at 3,000 feet. Southerlies going strong across south and eastern Alaska and the Gulf, with wind speeds crossing the Kenai at 35 to 40 knots. Easterlies across the interior and the Yukon Valley 25 to about 40 knots there. And northwesterlies coming across the central and western chains. Some of the highest wind speeds at this level over the central Aleutians around 50 knots for Adak and Atka. So turbulence, yes, we do expect some there across the chain below 4,000 feet, reaching considerable moderate levels. Also across and just south of the Brooks Range and into the Kobuk and Noatak Range, and across southwestern Alaska, the Kenai Peninsula, Prince William Sound, and parts of southeast.
When you think of a national park, you probably envision wide open natural spaces, undisturbed by human activity. There are indeed such places, but even in some of the most remote areas of a place like Kenai Fjords National Park in Alaska, the mark of man is present. Marine debris is a menace to the farthest reaches of our globe, and even designated national park lands are not immune. In the summer of 2009, the Resurrection Bay Conservation Alliance, a grassroots conservation organization based in Seward, Alaska, decided to do something about the marine debris fouling the beaches of Kenai Fjords National Park. Marine debris coordinator Tim Johnson had first-hand experience with the issue.
The summer before, my wife and I, Michelle, had done a paddle from Seward, sea kayak paddle from Seward to Homer. Really, our eyes were open to some areas that we didn't realize there was so much accumulation. It was very deceiving up front. You couldn't really get a feel for the extent and impact of it. You've got this nice high tide line that's quite pristine, and you really don't get a picture for the impact, the amount of debris in that area until you get behind those storm berms. You get back into the lagoons and the vegetation around those lagoons. And then you see the absolute extent back into that veg and how intertwined and enmeshed these decades of trash deposition. So we were just appalled by that and said we got to get something together on a larger scale.
The Resurrection Bay Conservation Alliance is a local nonprofit community organization, and they have been instrumental in helping the Park Service obtain funding to get larger boats to help move the debris, and they get volunteer labor and organize the work trips. And so it's really a partnership between the Park Service and the community to help get out and really get a project done that in and of itself any one group couldn't do on their own.
Most of that trash was baggable. However, there were large items, huge, piles of hauser line, for example, that we just had to hoist up onto the boat.
The volunteers didn't just bag, haul, and hoist the garbage, but also carefully recorded what types of debris were collected.
In many ways, the debris itself is a resource. Archaeologists use middens, the trash heaps, as a way of analyzing past cultures. And in one sense, marine debris is a form of a midden. It's a trash heap that left for the future would be something that people could use to analyze our culture. It may not say the best things about our culture or everything that we want, but we need to be able to document what we've done so that we can preserve that legacy, make sure that we as a society don't forget what we've been doing.
We had two larger categories of marine debris that we picked up. Commercial fishing means like, say, gill nets, large hauser lines, anything that would be associated with more of a commercial fishing scale. And then the second category was more recreational fishing and household, which would be general plastics, things like that. So we had about a 75% of the commercial fishing marine debris element, and about 25% of the recreational and household further out the bay. And we had the exact opposite the closer we got to Seward. Within the bay, it was about 25% commercial fishing versus 75% recreational fishing and household.
The trash is not just unsightly for park visitors, but also poses threats to wildlife and marine habitat.
Really one of the larger issues now that you go to this plastic that can really get into the food web and affect the food web differently than something like glass.
These substances, for instance, all these polystyrene blocks that are breaking down into all these little crumbly bits are further breaking down on a microscopic level, and how much of an impact that has, in this ecosystem is yet to be determined, but I think it's got pretty high potential.
Well known that sea turtles will eat plastic bags floating in the water. They look like jellyfish to a sea turtle, and Obviously, a plastic bag doesn't go well in the digestive system of a turtle. Albatross will see small pieces of plastic floating on the surface and think they're small fish and other food sources and eat that in their stomachs, especially in some of the northwestern Hawaiian Islands. They'll find dead albatross that have starved to death with a full stomach, and it's full of pieces of plastic.
We're affecting our local areas this way, but we need to be thinking about it from more of a state and global, international scale. And most importantly, to try and focus on prevention of it coming in the first place. Because we're just going to see this continuing, to build up on our beaches unless we're able to get a little bit more of an approach on prevention on the front end.
Marine debris is really a global problem, in all the oceans, and there are many different sources. Global shipping is one. Fishing debris from commercial fishing, recreational boating activity on land, stuff blowing off land, washing down streams, people just throwing stuff on the shore.
Though the problem can seem overwhelming, Johnson remains upbeat about making a positive difference.
No, you gotta start locally. You gotta, take control of what you can do, and make something with that, and try and move on from there.
Overall, more than 9 tons of debris was removed from the beaches of Kenai Fjords National Park and transported back to Seward to be deposited in a landfill.
People gave a lot to the project in order to make it happen. That was awesome. One of the most amazing experiences I've ever had. Being able to put that large of a group of volunteers together, dedicated volunteers to put that much effort and give that much time and pull all the different agencies together to see it all happen was incredible. It was incredible. Yeah, very fulfilling experience.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Moving on to your sea ice edge now, updated on this April the 17th. You'll notice these blue areas are expanding in their coverage across areas both north and south of the Bering Strait. Now, a lot of this is actually opening water where sea ice concentration is certainly below 80% and even lower than that. We think these are polynyas as that easterly flow is pushing the main sea ice to the west. We'll continue to see more opening in the water there, but you can see already the southern extent of that is pushing its way northward very quickly, and more open water is expected to form along the western coast here with that easterly flow lasting through pretty much the rest of the week, it looks like. You can always check out the latest sea ice forecast and information anytime at weather.gov/anchorage/ice. On to southeast now. With an approaching front, winds are going to pick up a little bit more. Look for gusts around Stevens Passage tomorrow, up to about 35 knots. A southeasterly flow generally in the inside passages, 20 to 25, 4 to 5 foot seas there. Southerlies across the northern Lynn Canal, not too bad, 15 knots and 3 foot seas, but that southerly flow continues up the outer coast, 25 knots with about 7 to 8 foot seas expected there. And with the front coming in as we head into Thursday, the winds are going to pick up from the south and the west. Look for seas around 14 feet across the outer coast, and that southeasterly flow picks up even more, 25 to 35 knots sustained, gust to 40 in Stevens Passage with a 5 to 7 foot sea. And don't forget again, if you're on land, it could be some snow up around the White Pass region. Here's a look at South Central now. Winds will be picking up inside of Prince William Sound from the east, 30 knots with a 7 foot sea, 9 foot seas on the outside. East and southeasterly flow down the Kenai Fjords area and into the Barren Islands region, 30 knots with 11 to 12 foot seas. Northeasterlies coming down Cook Inlet, 25 to 30 knots with a 7 foot sea expected there. For Thursday, northerlies diminish inside of Prince William Sound, still holding around 15 knots with that 3 foot sea. East and northeasterly winds coming around the north and western Gulf. Northerlies coming down Cook Inlet, 20 to 25, looking for 5 to 6 foot seas in most areas there for your Thursday. Inside of Bristol Bay on Wednesday, 20 knots from the south and east, a 5 foot seas expected, 11 foot seas building as you head down the Bering Sea coast. And then we get into that stronger southerly flow with low pressure working its way toward Kodiak Island Wednesday and into Thursday. You'll see winds coming coming up to about 30 knots as you head down towards Sandpoint with 11 to 18 foot seas there. 5 foot seas inside of Shelikof Strait. The winds and seas diminish there as we head into Thursday, down to about 10 knots from the east in Shelikof Strait, but we still have that south and westerly flow wrapping into low pressure as it's building toward the Kenai Peninsula. Look for a north and easterly wind across the Bering Sea coast, seas holding around 5 to 8 foot seas there, and southwesterly south of Sandpoint, bringing that number up to about 14 feet. For Wednesday across the chain, gales will continue, 35 to 40 knots in most areas. The Pacific coast looking at 20 to about 22 foot seas there, and 13 to 18 foot seas across the Bering Sea coast, expecting west to northwesterlies at 30 to 35 for Kiska to Attu, and about 15 to 18 foot seas on Wednesday. Diminishing even more to about 9 foot seas as we head into your Thursday. Still holding onto that general westerly flow with the highest seas around Nikolsky to Unalaska on either side of the chain. 17 to 19 foot seas expected for the Pacific, and the Bering Sea looking at about 15 to 17 foot seas. They're all in about that 30 to 35 knot wind, as I said. Across the west coast, you can see the effects of low pressure to your south, that offshore flow again working that ice away from the coast. 25 knots in most areas, 4 to 9 foot seas across the north, looking at 9 to about 13 foot seas across areas south of Etolan Strait and Nunivak Island. Northeasterlies into St. Paul and St. George with a 10 foot sea on a 20 knot wind. For your Thursday, not a real big change. Northeasterlies continue across the area, about 10 to 20 knots in all regions. 5 to 7 foot seas expected with 8 foot seas around the Pribilofs on more of a northerly flow, 20 knots with that 8 foot sea. Across the north, an easterly flow through the Beaufort, 20 to 25 still over the ice, and the Chukchi coast looking at 20 to about 30 knots from the east and the northeast. The strongest winds around Point Lay to about Wainwright or so. As we get into Thursday, a little bit more of a north and westerly shift as high pressure is moving across the Arctic Ocean just a little bit more. We're going to hold on to that east and northeasterly flow across the Chukchi Sea, 20 to about 30 knots. Still the strongest winds around Cape Lisburne to Point Hope as we head into your Thursday. Let's recap the weather for tonight. We're watching a front working its way across the Gulf. The main focus right now is out here in the west, and that's where we're finding our gales and periods of rain and snow mixed. Rain has been passing over the Anchorage area. Don't be surprised to run into some showers for the next 24 hours or so, but the real big interaction is going to be the snow across some of the higher terrain in south central, and the focus shifting to the White Pass and Klondike Highway region, where up to 9 inches of snow could be possible in the next 36 hours or so as we go into tomorrow night and into Thursday. Expect a much better chance of snow in that region. Rain for everywhere else, though. Thanks for watching Alaska Weather. See you tomorrow.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.